everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are putting our stencils to work like it said in the title. I had recently purchased a whole bunch of new layering stencils and I really hadn't had a chance to quite use them yet. So in today's video we are putting them to work. Only one of them do I actually know what the stencil is called. If you happen to have these stencils and know where they came from and what they're called, please put that in the comment section below so that I can label things appropriately. And we're using this stamp set today also. I honestly don't know who this is from either. So same thing. If you know who it's from, let me know. I have some HAMMERMILL cardstock and I did a lot of kind of planning ahead of time on what colors I was going to pair with what. I saw this on Pinterest and really wanted to give this kind of technique a try. I think I've seen Jennifer McGuire do something pretty much identical to this, and I think that's where the picture I saw on Pinterest came from. So the first thing I'm doing is, this is kind of like a sunflower, and I'm going to do a little bit of mixed media on this one. And so I wanted to do this one first so that it could be drying while I was stenciling the others and doing prep work and cleaning and all that jazz. So for this one, I wanted to use my Distress Oxide inks. I'm going to use 3 different ink lines today, but you can use whatever ink line you like, whatever kind of dye ink or pigment ink, hybrid, whatever it is that you like, go ahead and use that. For this one, this is one of the layers that does the petals on the flower. This looks like a sunflower to me. It may not be. You could color this however you please, but I colored it like a sunflower today because I thought that was very bright and cheery. And it's been cloudy and humid to no end, oppressively humid here in East Texas, and lots of rain. So I could use some bright and cheery. So that first layer I used squeezed lemonade, and then the second layer I used, let me see here, I used mustard seed. I almost changed that to not rusty hinge, but fossilized amber, and I'm glad I didn't, because this was actually the color I was really looking for. And I'm just doing flat color over all of these. Nothing fancy. I'm not trying to do any fancy ink blending. I'm just putting flat color over all of this. This is the stencil where you would want to do some masking or use a smaller blending brush, because this has not only the leaves but the centers of the flowers. Not unless you wanted the centers of the flowers green. That's totally cool. I didn't care because I knew I was going to do some mixed media kind of in the center of those flowers, and so it didn't matter if I was putting green over the top or not. Is my stenciling and my mixed media application perfect? No, it's not, and you can see that green in some places on the finished card. Did it bother me? No. Did I like it? No. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's where having smaller ink blending brushes really comes into play. And I have I think they're a 1/2 inch. And I kind of wish I had some even smaller ones when I get to another card that we're going to be doing some stenciling on. So I purchased this lunar paste from Hurley a while ago, and I just now popped it open. This is called Refined Copper, and it is beautiful. And this stuff goes on so creamy, so dreamy. It's lovely. And here I kind of wish that I would have cut a little teeny tiny circle mask. Just because I was trying to be super careful, but I kept getting that mixed media, that copper lunar paste where I didn't necessarily want it. And I end up smudging it in one spot and it gets kind of on the leaves. I was kind of bummed about that, but I wish I would have cut a little tiny circle mask about the size of that circle that's right there, and then I wouldn't have had to worry about it. I could have cut it from acetate or just scrap cardstock and just kind of worked it around, and then I wouldn't have had to worry about getting that copper stuff, that copper lunar paste where I didn't want it. So that is with everything stenciled, and I'm going to take my mat, my spatula, my stencils, all of the things to the sink and just run them under some warm soapy water and clean them off. One of the things I am going to do is put some press and seal over this jar of paste just so I can, eventually these things are going to dry out. I feel like I waste a lot of pastes because I don't get to them fast enough because I forget I have them. Or, you know, mixed media is not necessarily my go-to kind of media, my go-to techniques. And so I feel like I lose these pastes really quick. But in theory, the press and seal over the top will help kind of keep the air out and help them have a little bit longer shelf life. So I set that one off to dry, cleaned everything off, and now we're going to move on to this next one. This is called the Blobby Rose stencil from Altenew. This is the only one that I have a name for. I do apologize for that. This one has 4 stencils, I believe, 5 stencils. But one of the stencils actually has leaves and kind of more detail layers of the flowers. And so this is where having a smaller blending brush comes into play. I'm going to use Concord and 9th inks for this one. I've got TIDEPOOL, AQUA Sky, let me see here. TIDEPOOL, AQUA Sky, wait for it, OCEANSIDE, then Sprout and Parsley. And I'm going to just do, like I said, flat ink blending over all of this. This one, it was easier for me to start with the actual like flowers, the most open part of the flowers. I thought about starting with the leaves because sometimes that helps my brain kind of see where things are. But in this situation, it helped me to start with the flowers themselves. That gave me a better indication on what was going to be what for later stencils. So this one, I'm going to use the AQUA Sky. That's kind of the lighter one. And on this stencil, right in this top right corner, there's a little like flap of part of the stencil, and I catch it. I'm a very aggressive ink blender, apparently. And I catch a little bit of that stencil and I kind of bend it. When I cleaned off the stencil, I kind of bent it back the other way, and that did help. But just be mindful when you're stenciling, particularly this waffle flower grip mat is wonderful in the sense that it helps hold the stencil in place. But when you've got little parts and on the stencil itself that you're actually stenciling on your project, it doesn't help you there. And so something like pixie spray would be great. Or I know Kelly Taylor uses Tombow Mono Multi Glue and lets it dry, because when it dries, it's tacky. If you adhere something to it while it's wet, then it's permanent. And so those are kind of options if you are an aggressive ink blender like myself. So I'm going to go through and do all of these layers and just solid flat color. There was the stencil with the TIDEPOOL, and then here is the one with that we're going to be using, the OCEANSIDE. Now this one, this stencil has parts of the leaves on there. It has the detailed parts of the leaves. So this is where I grab my smaller ink blending brushes, and I'm going to do, once again, flat color over the OCEANSIDE, over the detailed parts of the flowers. And then I'm going to take a smaller green ink blending brush and do the same thing over those detailed parts of the leaves. For the leaves, the detailed parts, I'm going to be using the Parsley. That's my darker green. Here are my little 1/2 inch blender brushes. I purchased these off of Amazon, and they came with that AQUA holder too, which was pretty fantastic. I think it was like 20 bucks, and I got 10 brushes per set. I think there were some various options for that, but that's where I purchased mine. But Pink Fresh Studio has them. I think Altenew has some. In fact, I think the black one in the top of that, at the top of your screen, is from Altenew. And that just came in a kit. So I cleaned off that stencil just using a squirt of rubbing alcohol. I like to use that because it dries really fast. I picked that tip up from Jennifer McGuire. And then I went ahead and did the detailed layers in that Parsley ink. This is the final stencil. This one just does the big open spaces of the greenery. And for that one, I am using the Sprout ink, and I'm trying to be a little more conscious of loose areas and very fine areas on these stencils. But again, just the same flat color all the way through. So that is this one complete. That is just a really fun and really pretty stencil, a very fun, like whimsical feel. This is our final one. I'm only making 3 cards today. This is a final stencil I'm using. This one only has 3 layers, I believe, but there are various components to the leaves and flowers and detail layers and stuff like that on each stencil. So again, we're going to use those small blending brushes. And I'm going to be using some Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated inks for this one. I'm using Bubblegum, Sweets, and Taffy, and then Celery, Limelicious, and Perfection. So this one, it has like the flowers, and then it has a different kind of leaf on it. And so I'm trying to be very like conscious of what is what, and trying to make sure that I don't get ink where I don't necessarily want it, because pink and green are going to make like a weird like brownish gray color. It's going to be weird. Here I think I used the Limelicious to do these leaves. No, I think I used celery for these. Again, using that small blending brush. And then that one is all done. This next stencil has lots and lots of fine details, but what I'm going to show you is that it's connected still. So it's connected very, very closely, but it is connected. If all of those were loose, I would definitely want to use some pixie spray here. In fact, I was trying to go through my stencils and figure out which one I wanted to do for this particular video, and I didn't. Oh, that would be my daughter dropping a stool. Don't mind us. I was not to use a particular stencil because it had so much loose area, and I didn't want to break out with another product and use pixie spray. But I have it. I just was too lazy to use it. So I chose this stencil because those pieces are not loose. So on this one, I'm going to be using two of the greens. I think I use Perfection and Limelicious or Sprout, but I'm just trying to be kind of more specific. This is the stencil where I wish I had even smaller blending brushes. I can't remember. I think Honeybee has really small ones. I think Pink Rush Studio has really small ones, and I may be investing in some of those soon, just because that would have been really, really helpful for this particular section, because I was wanting to have various shades of green on here. So this is using, like I said, this either Celery, Limelicious, or Perfection in some random shape and order. I think this one is the Perfection. So here I'm going to lift up my stencil just to see if I like the variation in color, and I felt like there was like just two shades, and I had used 3 different ones. So I'm going to apply a little heavier hand of the Limelicious here, and then I will peel up the stencil. So onto the final stencil. This final one is some detail layers on the flowers themselves and some berries. And I wanted the detail layer on the flowers to be in the Taffy, and then the berries are going to be in the Sweets ink. And I would just peel up the stencil just to make sure that I had enough variation, and I would clean off my stencil, particularly since I was using the darker of the 2 inks. I would try to wipe off my stencil just so that I could get a little bit more of a truer color. So I'm going to use the Sweets ink here. So I went into my die stash, and I have these rectangle dies that almost make like a marquee around the edges. And I chose, sorry, we're just going to cough over here. The larger one I'm going to cut out from the actual stenciled panels themselves, and the smaller one, and we're going to cut that also from some colored cardstock that coordinates. So I'm just lining this up, trying to get this somewhat centered from top to bottom, left to right, and then we're going to cut that larger die from this one, from all of these stenciled panels as well. We're going to do that for all of these, and then we're going to use that smaller one to make one more cut. So I went and took the smaller of those dies and cut it once again from the larger stenciled panel that we cut out. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm just going to take this and center this stamp over the top of each of these smaller stenciled panels. I'm curious slash kind of nervous about this one in particular because we have that mixed media over the top, and I wasn't sure if it was going to bubble. I wasn't sure if it would just like resist the ink, resist the embossing powder, but we do okay. So I have some Ranger clear embossing powder and I have some VERSAFINE Onyx black ink, and I'm going to stamp this stamp in the middle using a heavy amount of anti-static powder tool. And I'm going to stamp this 2 or 3 times. I've never used this stamp before, and it is kind of a thicker stamp with thicker lines. And so I am going to stamp this a few times. And I'm going to repeat this for every single one of those panels. Just line it back up in that bottom right corner of my MISTI, stamp it 2 or 3 times, pour on clear embossing powder, and then I will heat set those. So on this one, because that mixed media has some height to it, the embossing didn't get all the way down. So I'm going to take a Sharpie marker and just go around those edges using a Sharpie marker. Does it completely cover it and fix it? No. But does it do enough that I would do it again? Yes. It does a fairly decent job of kind of making that look a little more seamless. So there it is with that Sharpie marker kind of filling in some of those gaps in those letters. So the next thing we're going to do is repeat that on all of the other panels. So I have my card base here, and I'm going to put my frame on my card. And I'm trying to make sure that I have the pattern going in the right direction and that it is going to be kind of a seamless flow from top to bottom as far as the pattern in the paper and where I have the sentiment. So I'm trying to be conscious of that before I glue these borders down. One of the things you could do is put some foam tape on those borders, give those some dimension. You could have your sentiment kind of inset into there, but I kind of end up putting just a few pieces of cardstock behind our sentiment just to help that stand up just a little bit. But I'm going to glue each of these mats onto their coordinating stenciled patterned we have there. And then I'm going to do some measuring because like I said, I want to have some of this, I want the sentiment panel, the colored sentiment panel to be popped up just a little bit. I think I should have added maybe a few more pieces, but this is just some Paper Studio 80-pound cheapy cardstock, and I just measured the colored panel, the plain cardstock colored panel, and I'm going to glue 3 of those together and then glue those onto the back right here, and then set those inside their coordinating panel here. I wish I would have added more, or maybe even done some like foam tape. What I could have done is just cut out multiples of that smaller marquee that I used that has the actual sentiment on there. I could have done that. But I was kind of going for speed. My kiddos were napping, and so I was on a little bit of a time crunch. These cards are actually going to their, to the nursery leaders and the like children's chorister. They are very special ladies, and they do wonderful things with those kids, and I am very, very grateful for them. So as we give teacher appreciation gifts to my big kids' teachers at school, I like to give my kids, like Sunday school teachers and nursery leaders and that kind of thing, gifts as well. So we're just going to go through, glue each of these onto their coordinating panel, making sure we add our cardstock backers to each of them, and then these cards will be done. So that is it. That is all 3 cards done. Very simple. It gave me a chance to use some stencils that have just been sitting in my stash waiting to be used. Got a little mixed media going on. Did some heat embossing. Got to play with all of my inks. If you know, that's where I like to kind of spend my money, is on all of the colors of all of the inks. I will list everything that I used below, including the colors of the cardstock I used, and of course the inks that I used. But I appreciate you spending time with me. Thank you so much. I hope you felt inspired, and we will see you next time.